In 1337, two nations lit a fire that would rage for more than a century. What began as a war over crowns would soon spiral into something far more brutal. And what happened next still shapes Europe to this day. Before the bombs of World War II, before the trenches of World War I, there was this. A medieval conflict so long, so bitter, that it redefined loyalty, warfare, and leadership itself. This is the 100 Years' War, not just a timeline of knights and castles, but a brutal epic of betrayal, fire, and fate. England and France locked in a battle over who held the right to rule, and who was willing to die for it. We'll take you from its unexpected origins to the turning points no one saw coming, and reveal how it quietly rewrote European history forever. Chapter 1. The King Who Left No Heir. The year is 1328. Paris is in mourning. The French king, Charles IV, has died. His funeral is grand, filled with weeping nobles, robed bishops, and worried advisors. But beneath the solemn ceremony, there's rising panic, because Charles IV has no son. And in the 14th century, that's a problem. You see, monarchies weren't just about bloodlines. They were about stability, borders, alliances, power. And right now, France has none of that. So who gets the crown? Three men step forward with shaky claims, but one name stands above them all: Edward III, the King of England. And here's where things get tense. Edward is no outsider. His mother was the sister of the late king, meaning Edward has French royal blood. But the French court decides against him. They pull out an old law, the Salic Law, which says no woman and no descendant through the female line may inherit the French crown. And just like that, Edward is out. They hand the crown to Philip VI, a cousin of the former king, French-born, French-blooded, and very aware that a storm is brewing across the channel. Edward is furious. Not at first. He plays it cool, keeps the peace. But inside, he's burning, because in his eyes, they stole the crown. Chapter 2. The spark that set everything off. For 9 years, something dangerous builds in silence. England and France pretend things are fine. Behind the scenes, it's anything but. England controls lands in Gascony, French lands. France wants them back. Both sides start interfering in each other's trade. They start funding enemies of the other. Then in 1337, France seizes Gascony. And that's it. Edward declares war. But it's not just a military operation. It's a claim to the French throne. He redesigns the royal seal of England to include the French fleur-de-lis, signaling his intention: I'm not just at war, I'm coming for the crown you denied me. This wasn't going to be a year-long spat. It was the beginning of something no one could stop and no one would live long enough to see end. Chapter 3. The Sea of Slaughter, Battle of Sluys.
The first major clash, Battle of Sluys, 1340. To today's eyes, it might not seem like much, but for medieval Europe, this was jaw-dropping. The French Navy is docked, chained together in a defensive line. The English ships sail in, archers ready, and the moment the battle begins, chaos erupts. Arrow storms rain down, boarding axes slam into wood, and for 10 straight hours, 10 hours, men scream, bleed, and drown. At the end, France's navy is decimated. Their defensive line didn't protect them, it boxed them in. England now controls the sea. That might seem small, but here's why it matters. Whoever owns the sea controls trade, supply lines, reinforcements, the entire skeleton of medieval warfare. And right now, that's Edward. But the war is still young, and the horror has barely started. Chapter 4. The enemy no sword could kill, the Black Death. Just when the war seemed ready to explode into full chaos, something invisible arrived. 1347. It didn't wear armor, It didn't carry arrows or siege weapons. It crept in quietly, on ship hulls, in flea bites, through coughing lungs. It was the bubonic plague, the Black Death. It did what no English or French king could do. It stopped the war. Or so people thought. Within 4 gruesome years, the Black Death swept across Europe and erased nearly half the population. Dead in their homes, dead in the streets. Entire villages disappeared as if the earth had swallowed them. In both England and France, entire armies vanished, commanders, foot soldiers, and with fewer people to work the land, harvests failed. Europe wasn't dying, it was collapsing. But even after all that, everything they'd lost, the war kept going. Why? Because when you've already lost everything, the crown becomes the last thing you cling to. Most people assumed the Black Death paused the war, but in reality, it made the fighting even worse, because now every tax hit harder, every town mattered more, and every soldier lost was impossible to replace. Chapter 5. The Battle of Poitiers and the king who was captured. It's now 1356. France is under King John II, a bold, proud monarch. Edward's son, the ruthless and terrifying Black Prince, is carving a path of destruction through Aquitaine. His army is fewer in number, but smarter. Fewer knights, more longbowmen, more scouts, better supply lines. France assembles a massive French force, 4 times the size of the English. Now pause. How do you think that turns out? Bigger is better, right? Wrong. In an open field near the city of Poitiers, the English position themselves in a tight defensive posture, hedgerows, ditches, muddy roads. And when the French charge, they get slaughtered. Waves of mounted knights fall under arrow storms. Thousands are taken prisoner. Horses blind with panic. Chaos. And then the unthinkable. King John II himself is captured. A king on a battlefield, taken alive. It's humiliating, devastating. France grinds to a stop. The English treat the king like gold, dressed, fed, protected, then ransom him. He's eventually returned for enough gold to bankrupt half the country. But a deeper ransom was being paid: France's dignity. At Poitiers, the French lost their king, but more importantly, they lost their sense of invincibility. Chapter 6. The uprising no one controlled, the peasant vengeance. France is weak. The king is still in captivity. The nobles are taxing harder than ever before to fund the war. And finally, something snaps. Not on the battlefield, but in the villages. It's called the Jacquerie. And it's not a movement. It's a rage-fueled revolt. Tens of thousands of peasants, farmers, laborers, broken men, rise up with whatever they can find: tools, chains, fire. They burn chateaux to the ground. They slaughter noble families, not for victory, but for revenge. This isn't about England or France. It's about centuries of oppression, squeezed harder by war. The French aristocracy strikes back, swift, brutal, unforgiving. Entire villages are wiped out, men, women, children. And again, the kingless, shattered kingdom falls into terror. The 100 Years' War wasn't just foreign versus foreign. It triggered one of the first peasant revolutions in European history. And its echoes would return again and again in French uprisings centuries later. Chapter 7. The Night of Fire, the Battle of Crécy. Let's rewind a bit to a battle that revealed everything wrong with France's war tactics. Battle of Crécy, 1346. Earlier in the war, but a turning point. The French had more men, more horses, and they believed more glory on their side. The English? Less nobility, more archers, longbowmen. Let's pause here. Why does this matter? Because the English longbow was a weapon of devastation. It could pierce armor from 200 yards. It was fast, quiet, savage, and used by commoners, not elites. Crécy opened like a medieval thunderstorm. Mud, rain, French cavalry charged across a torn-up field, screaming war cries. Then, a wall of arrows. The French fell by the dozen. Riders trampled their own men. Command structures shattered. By nightfall, the field was littered with the bodies of over 10,000 French soldiers and 0 French victories. The Battle of Crécy proved something that doomed France for decades. Pride in class and tradition could no longer defeat organized, modern strategies. But if France's tactics were outdated, their pride wounded, their king ransomed, then how did they turn it around in the decades to come? And could one teenage girl really be the key to saving everything? Chapter 8. The Girl Who Changed History, Joan of Arc. Fast forward to 1429. It's been nearly a century since Edward III declared war. Generations have passed, kings have died, fortresses have fallen, entire cities have changed hands more times than anyone can count. And France is on the brink of collapse. The English claim more French territory than ever before. The French crown, what little remains of it, is in the hands of weak Dauphin Charles VII, a man many don't even recognize as king. But on a distant hill in the countryside of Domremy, a 17-year-old girl, illiterate, poor, with no military experience, begins claiming the unthinkable, that God has told her to save France. Her name? Jeanne d'Arc, or, as history remembers her, Joan of Arc. Kings laugh at her, generals ignore her, even the church questions her. But Charles is desperate. He gives her what no one else would, a chance. And what happens next changes everything. France didn't just need an army, it needed hope. And Joan didn't bring strategy or swords, she brought belonging. She made France believe again that it could win. Chapter 9. The Siege of Orléans. France strikes back. Orléans, 1429. A critical city, strategically located, symbolically enormous. It had been surrounded by English forces for months. Supplies were dwindling, spirits broken. Everyone had written it off. Then Joan arrived. She wore armor, carried a banner, rode at the front. She wasn't a figurehead. She fought, physically led charges, pulled wounded men off the field, rallied troops when all hope felt lost. And within 9 days, the English siege broke. Orléans, a city given up for dead, celebrated with fireworks, cannon blasts, singing, weeping. It was a miracle.
And make no mistake, it was Joan. She didn't just lift a siege, she rewrote the entire trajectory of the war. For the first time in decades, it was England that had reason to be afraid. Chapter 10. Betrayal, martyrdom, and a fire that wouldn't die. But no glory in this war lasted long. Joan's victories kept piling up, one city, then another. She accompanied Charles VII to Reims, where he was crowned king, a moment France thought it might never see again. But then came the betrayal. In 1430, Joan was injured and captured by the Burgundians, allies of France, but loyal to their own cause. They sold her to the English. And the English didn't kill her for battle. They burned her as a heretic for wearing men's clothes, for claiming divine voices, for challenging church order. She was just 19 years old. Rouen, a public square, smoke rising, flames dancing, soldiers silent, some cried. But yet, her death did something even greater than her life. She became a symbol, a saint, a myth that gave France the final will to fight. You can kill a soldier. You can even kill a nation. but you can't kill a symbol. Joan of Arc became France itself. Chapter 11. The Turnaround, Orléans, and the Final Push. Following Joan's death, France could have crumbled again, but instead, it hardened. Joan didn't die in vain. Her legacy mobilized a generation, not of knights, but modern soldiers. France began organizing standing armies, professional commanders, mobile tactics. They stopped relying on chivalry and started focusing on strategy. Then came the Siege of Orléans in 1428. You might never hear about it in school books, but it was vital. Orléans was a transit point connecting major trade routes and fortresses. Lose it, and France was cut in half. The English threw everything at it, firebombing, tunneling, sieging for months. But French grand companions, hardened veterans using guerrilla warfare, destroyed English supply lines. They struck at night, ambushed supply wagons, turned local peasants into spies and saboteurs. By spring, the English retreated. The Siege of Orléans didn't just hold the line, it turned it. For the first time, France had tactical control of the war. Chapter 12. Collapse of a Giant, the End of a Century. The final years were slow. Not quiet, but tired. England began falling apart, not from swords, but from within. Parliament refused more war funding. There were riots in London, power struggles in the royal family. The public was sick of a war no one alive had started. Meanwhile, France surged. City after city reclaimed, alliances with Burgundy restored. The English pushed back to a coastal dot, Calais. And finally, in 1453, France captured Castillon-sur-Dognon, the last major bastion of English power outside Calais. Just like that, the war was over. No grand treaty, no final duel, just silence after 116 years. The 100 Years' War didn't end with a bang, but with a breath. We think of history as names, dates, borders. But this war, it wasn't about who wore the crown. It was about what a nation is. Before this, kings ruled because of blood. But during this war, from Crécy, Poitiers, Orléans, people began believing in land, language, connection. National identity was born here, in fire, betrayal, and heartbreak. This wasn't just England versus France. It was the death of the medieval era and the birth of the modern world. The 100 Years' War didn't just change the map. It changed the mindset of Europe, and in many ways, inspired every revolution that followed. What moment from this war shocked you most? Tell us in the comments. And if this story pulled you in, you have to watch our deep dive on Napoleon's last stand.